Well, breaking news in the last hour, the man thought to be the only remaining candidate to chair the government's National Grooming Gangs inquiry has withdrawn from consideration for the role. Joining me now is Jim Gamble, who announced his withdrawal in a letter to the Home Secretary just a few moments ago. Very good to talk to you today, Mr Gamble. Gone through your letter, there's a lot to pick through. Explain in your own words what led to your decision to step back today.
I think the growing level of toxicity and the fact that in the midst of lots of misinformation, I think many of the victims and survivors were being disrespected and misinformed, and I have a genuine feeling that some of that was about people using and abusing their position and influence with them. So I think, look, whenever I was approached to say, look, would you allow your name to go forward? I thought, well, this is the opportunity of a lifetime to do something that will really make a difference for those young people who carry a legacy of pain because of the failures of the past. And when I went into it, I was absolutely certain that it had to be victim and survivor influenced. So when I hear talk that victims and survivors were having questions vetted, I was totally unaware of that, and I haven't seen any evidence of it. When I was talking to victims and survivors, they were asking me questions, some of which they may have shared, but others that were clearly impromptu. From my point of view, I explained to them what my approach would be, and that is once I was selected, if I was selected, that I would get on my bike and go around those places and spaces in the country where I could sit down and listen to the lived experience of victims and survivors. Not just a small group, but a much broader group. Because having worked with victims and survivors of abuse for over 20 years, I understand. I don't understand it to the degree they do, carrying that pain. But I've seen that pain reflected in many of the engagements that I've had. So for me, this was the opportunity of a lifetime to do something to support people who I really admire. The courage to come forward and be part of a panel, let alone to engage with media and to unpack the harm you've suffered for the benefit of others and try and drive change is key. So it's with a heavy heart that I step back from this. But I want to make it clear, for those people out there who have been mischief making, for those people that have said to everybody, well, he's an ex-police officer. Do you know what? I'm an ex-police officer, that's true, because I resigned in protest at the political interference with the Developing Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. I didn't stay, I didn't remain quiet, I didn't go along to get along, to make sure that I'd get a gong or something else. Do you know what? Whenever they said they were going to do something I thought was wrong for children, I resigned. And for the 15 years following that, I'll stand by my record. You know, I'll stand by the work that I've done on the first ever domestic homicide review. I'll stand by the work that I've done around misogyny, on Dulwich College through Everyone's Invited, on the work that I've done on Oxfam GB, calling it out where I see it, and most recently, the work on the Child Q investigation, where rather than hide behind or allow institutions to hide behind, systems language, where I actually said, it is likely, in my opinion, that Child Q was the victim of what happened at the hands of the police because of racism, because of adultification. And even further, for those people who should have taken the time to do their research before they misinformed victims and survivors. I revisited the Arthur Labinjo Hughes case, where Arthur, we had been told, was what had gone wrong was because of systems, it was because the right meetings didn't take place. But it was clearly apparent to me that West Midlands Police let that child down. Now, did I hide that? Did I use ambiguous language? No, I didn't. In the report, which is publicly available, I said that he would most likely be alive if the police had done their job right. So to imply for 1 second that I would align myself with any political party to hide their blushes is just nonsense. And there are letters that I've sent to this administration and challenges I put to the last which prove that.
You're clearly angry. We can see that. You talk about people mischief making, misinformation being given to the victims. Where is this influence coming from? Who is making this misinformation?
Well, here's the thing. If you watch Prime Minister's Question Time today, if you watch the way this has been engaged at a political level, it's not been engaged in an opportunistic way that says, look, now, at last, this is the right time and the right place for us to collaborate, for politicians of all, sides to come together to do what's right. It's being used as politically point score. So you have people from one party not thinking, okay, let's work together and make sure this is right, but trying to promote. I mean, we're not near an election yet, so there was no need for them to get involved in party political point scoring to say we are better than you. There are ways and means where they should have come together. And people have reached out to me from all of the parties involved while I was in this process saying, look, we think you're the right person. And I'm saying, look, what we need to do is bring the politicians together, because the last thing victims and survivors need is to see the infighting that's going on. Our fundamental focus should be on them. And I think there are people who have left this who really need to be in the process. And if it's my presence that's preventing them from being within and informing it, Fiona Goddard, a victim and survivor I have nothing but respect for. I've watched her interviews over the years. I think there's a generosity of spirit with the way she looks at how some young men become involved in this type of behaviour, and the way she unpacks the emotional hurt and harm that she's had to carry for many, many years. That's a person that you need inside the system. So whatever the rights or wrongs of this, if my presence, if the likelihood that I would lead this was going to make people like Fiona step away, then I needed to make the decision to step away. But there are a lot of people who serve their own vested interests in this, and they know who they are.
Well, let's be clear. I mean, you talk about watching what happened in the Houses of Parliament and in Prime Minister's questions. We saw the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, go at the Prime Minister. We saw the Safeguarding Minister mentioned also. I mean, are you saying a plague on all their houses, or are you saying one side is worse than the other?
I'm saying the current government have the responsibility and the authority to drive this forward. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen nothing that indicates to me that they're trying to minimise or mitigate. In my conversations, I was clear. We needed the terms of reference to remain focused. We didn't need to broaden them out. We needed to be able to construct terms of reference that were agreed first and foremost with survivors immediately after the appointment was made. We needed a programme of work that it compensated survivors for the harm that had been inflicted on them, that created opportunities for them where they'd missed life opportunities in education or other areas of work or life, that they could be accelerated or fast-tracked into positions where that could be compensated to them. But the bottom line is, when you have tit-for-tat party political politics, I reflect on the time, and you can find it if you search it online, whenever Boris Johnson from the Conservative Party was talking about spaffing money up against a wall. And that money he was talking about was being invested in non-recent child abuse investigations. I don't remember people at the time saying within the party, well, he cannot be the leader, or he cannot be the Prime Minister. So everybody needs to park their own petty personal or political issues and focus on what's right for victims. In stepping back, I am trying to do that. But these other individuals need to stop playing games with this, because actually this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I've heard someone say, well, we've waited this long, so we can wait a bit longer. The longer you wait, the more stale the evidence will get. The more people who need to be held account will move on and retire or die. So this needs to get the right person into this role, whoever that is. And people say, well, look, it should be a judge. Well, here's the thing. It doesn't matter about what your previous occupation was. If you're a judge, if you're a police officer, if you're someone in health, you're someone in social care, or even the third sector. It's not about your previous occupation, it's about your character. And you judge character on the basis of what people have done. That's how you know who they truly are. Not what other people say about them, but what they've actually done and what they've achieved and where they've delivered challenge. Because there's not a single body or agency who hasn't let these young people down. Not a single one. Whether it's the judiciary and commentary that's made, or sentences that have been passed, issues that need to be addressed, police corruption, police incompetence, the issues around social work and understanding the impact on young girls who are put in a position whereby they need support. They need proper support that understands what's happened to them, how it's happened, and what the impact is. So whatever they do moving forward, I don't think they need to look at the person's occupation. I think they need to look at their track record and their history. And Louise Casey has provided such a fabulous foundation upon which they can build. If I'd been successful in my first day with statutory powers, I would have issued notifications to every local authority in the country to provide, their grooming gang profile, their action plan, what they were doing, every complaint that they'd had and every review that had taken place. And I would have issued a direction to the inspection bodies to give them a short period of time to get their data collection together so that you'd be able to identify who was doing what and where and what exactly that meant. Because there are issues that have to be addressed. And at no stage did anyone say to me, well, look, we don't really want you to deal with the issue of grooming gangs and their antecedents, whether they're Pakistani or whether they're white. No one has tried to influence me in that way at any stage. So people have to stop scaremongering. People have to come together. They need to collaborate. We need to put victims at the centre of this. And we need this process to steady itself, to restart and to move on with a much more collaborative sense. Because people sniping from the sidelines very often serve no purpose other than their own.
I'm just trying to get to be a little bit clearer about who your anger is directed at. You've talked about people stop sniping from the sidelines and people have to stop scapegoating and playing political games. Are you talking about the current government or are you talking about the opposition? Or are you talking about both?
Well, primarily, I'm talking about some of the opposing parties. The current government are trying to do this. And before people, launch onto Twitter, well, he was a member of the Labour Party, of course he would say that. I was a member of the Labour Party in 2015 because they had formed in Northern Ireland and I wanted to participate in politics that was non-sectarian, that you didn't have to be a unionist, a loyalist or a nationalist. I was in it for a year. I left when Jeremy Corbyn was elected. And you know what? When I was a much younger man, I tilted towards the Conservatives. But I've learned that politics is something where people earn your vote. So I'm not influenced by anyone. And as I've said to you already, when Boris Johnson created the spaffing fiasco comment that was disgusting and deeply hurtful, I challenged it. When I have worked with the government around issues around out-of-school settings, I have challenged central government, regardless of who they are. And most recently, I've been challenging the Department of Education over the new care reform. Much of it is good, but that bit that removes the independent scrutiny and allows police, social care and health to mark their own homework is fundamentally flawed. And I've challenged this government in that regard. So people need to do their homework before they begin, using a veneer approach to influence people who have been exploited. And I think some of the approaches in this are exploitive on top of that, because misinforming and misdirecting is not going to help people. And that's why I feel that this has become so toxic. The misinformation around it has become, in some cases, so vile. I mean, there are people who were online saying, well, Jim is the cover-up king. And here's the thing, if they haven't already deleted their texts, they probably need, or their tweets, they probably need to start doing so. Because I'll not be defamed by someone hiding behind Twitter to suggest that I would cover up anything that happened to a vulnerable young person. Quite the opposite. And my record will prove that these aren't empty words. But what happens is, if you're not able to come out and speak, you're not able to clarify that. You're not able to give people a contextual understanding of who you are and what you'll do. And I believe if this process was begun again, that there should be an opportunity, either through a select committee or through the candidates being interviewed by media, for them to explain who they are and what they do, to address any of the ambiguities that are out there, and if necessary, go before a select committee, whereas there can be transparency about the character of the person selected, so that victims and survivors can, with ease, look at, understand and agree or disagree with the person that's been put before them.
Briefly, Jim, do you think this is salvageable? Do you think that this inquiry can still work, or do you think we have to go back to square one?
Oh, I think it's totally salvageable. And I mean, look, at the end, it has to be salvageable. We have got industrial level rape, and I'm not saying that today for this interview. Go back to the interview you did with me 2 years ago over the Hull grooming gang, where I made clear that this was industrial level rape, where I made clear that we needed to pivot and treat this as if it was counter-terrorism. It needed to be taken as seriously as any other crime, if not more so. I mean, so we can't afford to let this falter. We can't afford it not to move forward. What they need to do is simply take a pause, review and revise what they're doing to make sure they can bring victims and survivors with them, and then move forward at pace. Because I fear that if this takes too long, it won't be, well, it doesn't matter how long it takes. People move on, people die, evidence will be lost. People need to be held account, institutions need to be held to account, and the longer this takes, the less evidence that will be available. So it's critical, and I don't believe that the process cannot be rehabilitated. I absolutely believe it can, and to be honest, I say this too, I'm absolutely convinced that the Home Secretary is without doubt determined to drive this through. You can see that in the statements that have been made. So why not collaborate across the benches? You know, whether it's the Lib Dems, whether it's the Conservatives, whether it's Reform, why not come together in this pause period, collaborate, agree what it is that you want to see? Because otherwise you're left in a position where it continues to be adversarial in the margins, and that just won't help those young people carrying this legacy of pain. And it will make them more vulnerable and some of them more desperate because they think, nothing will be done. And here's the other thing. There'll be many victims and survivors who haven't yet come forward. And they need to have confidence in the competence of this system. And I would say to them, without any hesitation, you need, when you are right, to come forward. For those of you who've already come forward, you need to be respected. You need to be listened to. You need to be properly engaged. Because if this is not survivor-centric, if it's not appropriately trauma-informed when engaging with survivors who've been through what most if not all of these young people have, then there's a problem. So yes, it can be fixed. I believe Louise Casey is the right person to be involved in providing advice. And I think if the politicians, and there are many sensible individuals on all sides, if they can work more effectively together on this, then we can create a focus that isn't on attacking one another, but actually on attacking the grooming gangs and focusing on the harms that were inflicted in the past, whether they were intentional or unintentional, to ensure that in the future, the legacy these young victims create is one whereby others don't have to go through what they have suffered.
And just one final thing, Jim, before we let you go. We've heard from one of the victims this afternoon who said that they felt that your heart wasn't in it. And they said in a meeting, you apparently said, "What the hell have I got myself involved in?" Did you say that? Can you give us some context around that?
Well, I can't give you any context around that. But I mean, what I said in the meeting was, if I haven't got your confidence, if I haven't got your trust, then, I will step away from this. If I cannot bring you with me, there's no point in me being here. At the end of the day, I've explained to the victims and survivors that I've engaged, and I've had good feedback from the majority of them, what it is I think should happen. So I was absolutely committed to this. I made clear, or at least I thought I had, that ultimately, I wanted to deliver change for them.